Shocking Bigfoot Encounters. True sightings in BC, Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. If you think Bigfoot is just a shadow in the trees, think again. In British Columbia, a hunter spent 6 nights trapped inside a cabin as something hammered on the walls, circled in the snow, and pressed its face against the window. In Washington, 4 campers sat frozen as 2 giants stepped into the firelight, standing side by side in utter silence. In Idaho, the silence broke when a creature charged across a raging river straight at 2 men, its roar shaking the valley. And in Oregon, a family learned too late that a massive figure had been watching them all night from the ridge above their camp. 4 encounters, 4 states, 4 faces of the same mystery. So the question is, protector or predator? Before we dive in, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, your city, your country, and rate this story at the end from 0 to 10. Chapter 1. 6 Nights in the Cabin, Skina Mountains, British Columbia, 2008. The cabin was small, no larger than a classroom, built from hand-hewn logs and roofed with thin tin that rattled whenever the wind swept across the valley. Around it, a wall of towering spruce and fir pressed in their snow-laden branches, hanging heavy like white arms reaching down. There was no electricity, no radio, only the dim flame of an oil lamp and the faint glow of a cast-iron wood stove. A winter night in that place was like no other, silent to the point of suffocation. Silence so deep you could hear your own heartbeat, and even the snow settling seemed to echo. November 11th, 0 a.m. The first strike came without warning. Thud. The stovepipe rattled, the lantern swayed violently, shadows lurching across the log walls. The hunter jolted awake, his pulse thundering so loud he swore it filled the room. Outside, a pale moon washed the clearing in a ghostly glow, while a fine dust of snow drifted silently down. He sat on the edge of his bunk, clutching his rifle but unable to raise it. The fire in the stove shrank to a dull glow, flickering like his own clenched heartbeat. 10 minutes later, another impact, deeper, heavier, struck from the far wall near the back window. He flung open the door, cold air slicing his face, but the clearing lay utterly still, frozen in lifeless quiet. November 12th. The noises returned, this time louder, heavier, more deliberate. Each time he stepped outside with his flashlight, the night fell utterly silent. But the moment he closed the door, the pounding resumed. That was when the realization sank in. Whatever was out there knew he was watching. The resinous scent of pine seemed invaded by something acrid, musky, unfamiliar. By morning, fresh dents scarred the cabin walls as if a heavy timber had been slammed against them. November 13th. The scratching began. A long, deliberate scrape dragged along the logs. His spine prickled. Then came a rain of impacts across the roof. The cabin trembled, a bucket toppled, and the latch on the front door rattled as if someone pressed against it. He knew then this was no wind, no snow. Through the curtain, a massive shadow slid past, gone in an instant, yet impossibly tall, moving with intent. November 14th. Tracks in the snow. While checking his trapline, he stumbled across impressions in a soft patch of snow. Strides nearly 6 feet apart, each track 16 to 17 inches long, narrow at the heel, rounded at the toe. He forced himself to call them bear tracks, but deep down, he knew better. Bears don't walk in straight lines. That night, the nightmare peaked. The pounding centered on the front wall and the door, each blow so violent dust fell from the rafters. The lantern shook, shadows jittered like frantic ghosts. And then, a shape pressed against the window pane. 2 amber eyes glowed in the lamplight, set far higher than any man could stand outside the cabin. Warm, fetid breath fogged the glass, leaving a greasy smear that streaked down the pane. His hands trembled so violently he couldn't lift the rifle. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure melted back into the dark, leaving only the crunch of heavy steps retreating into the snow. November 15th. The cabin became a drum. Blows rained from every side, sporadic, then rapid like war drums echoing through the forest. A step cracked. A section of tin roof peeled loose. When he threw the door open, the clearing stared back at him empty, but the stench of musk clung in the air. November 16th, the final night. The pounding began early before 9. This time, no circling, no games. 3 brutal strikes hammered the door, shaking the latch to its breaking point. The curtain ballooned inward as if breath pressed against the glass. At 1:00 a.m., a blow hit so hard it cracked an interior beam near his bunk. That was it. He stuffed his gear into a sack, sat waiting for first light, and abandoned the cabin through knee-deep snow, never to return. Analysis reports from British Columbia often describe multi-night escalations, beginning with isolated knocks building into circling, then direct window contact. They reveal a pattern of persistence, patience, even strategy. That is why the 2008 Skina Mountains incident stands as one of the most chilling classic Canadian cases of prolonged Bigfoot interaction with an isolated dwelling. Chapter 2. Two Giants by the Fire, Okanagan. Washington, 2016. The campsite was nothing more than a flat bench carved into the mountainside, bordered by a small creek and surrounded by towering pine. On that August night, the sky was clear, the air mild, the firelight flickering in a tight orange circle. 4 friends, 2 men, 2 women in their early 30s sat around the flames, laughter echoing through the stillness, punctuated by the crackle of burning wood. 10:30 p.m. One of them froze mid-sentence. "Do you see that between the trees to the west 2 faint orbs glimmered? Not lanterns, not deer eyes. They hovered too high, unmoving, reflecting the campfire with a dull amber glow. The group swept their flashlights toward the spot, and the eyes vanished. The forest swallowed everything again, 20 minutes later. This time the sound of steps, slow, deliberate crushing leaves underfoot from the south, upright, heavy. Then another pair of eyes flared, this time to the east. 2 directions, 2 watchers. The forest fell utterly silent. Even the insects stopped. Only the thundering of human hearts remained. 11:20 p.m. The campers threw fresh wood on the fire. Flames leapt higher, and that was when they saw them. From the tree line, 2 colossal shapes emerged, standing upright, nearly 9 feet tall. Their shoulders were as broad as door frames, arms, hanging long hands, brushing near their knees. Their coats were black, but in the firelight shimmered with a faint reddish sheen like embers in the dark. They halted just beyond the clearing, no more than 25 to 30 yards away, towering over the brush. They did not move. They simply stood side by side, staring into the camp. A trembling hand raised a flashlight. The beam caught their eyes, igniting them into blazing amber. One of the giants lifted an arm across its face, a human reflex. Then, as though by silent agreement, both stepped backward, slowly, deliberately, until they melted back into the trees. Morning light. On the ground were prints broad, deep, 16 to 18 inches long, spaced in long strides, branches broken chest high, grass pressed flat into faint paths leading into the forest. Analysis. Unlike the Canadian case where a single hunter was harassed, this encounter was remarkable because 2 beings appeared together. Researchers call this parallel observation a rare phenomenon in Bigfoot reports. The fact that they emerged side by side under controlled firelight suggests that in Washington, Bigfoot may not be solitary wanderers but members of small groups moving and observing in tandem. Chapter 3. The River Crossing and the Charged Clearwater River, Idaho, 2014. The Clearwater River lay silent that night. A thin crescent moon hung low, spilling a pale, icy ribbon of light across 70 yards of dark water. 2 middle-aged fishermen sat on a gravel bar surrounded by the damp scent of stone fish and lantern smoke. The steady lap of water against the shore was the only sound, like the river itself was singing a lullaby. No wind, no insects, just 2 men and the endless current. 8:10 p.m. One man paused, tilting his head. "You hear that?" Amid the hush of the river came a rhythm, thump, thump, measured heavy, echoing from the opposite bank. Not the shuffle of 4 legs, but the cadence of something walking upright, each step deliberate, weighted. From the shadows emerged a figure, not a bear. The posture was wrong. Shoulders squared, head slightly pitched forward, chest rising with each breath. It loomed so large it stood out even against the dark forest behind it. The men froze, the rush of blood in their ears louder than the river itself. Then came a sound that hollowed their bones, a long, low exhale, deep and guttural, like a growl pressed down, carrying across the water. The lantern rattled in one man's shaking hands, and then it stepped into the river. The current, fierce enough to sweep a man away in seconds, surged against its thighs, yet it waded effortlessly, water exploding around each stride. Spray flew in sheets, mingling with the sound of its heavy breath together, creating a nightmarish rhythm in the stillness. When it reached the gravel bar, it rose to its full height, water streaming down massive shoulders, the moonlight silvering its frame. For a heartbeat, it stood motionless. Then, without warning, it charged. Boom, boom, boom. Each step pounded like a hammer, scattering rocks, shaking the ground. The fishermen screamed, dropping rods and gear, bolting into the dark. One stumbled, palms tearing open on sharp stone, but he scrambled to his feet, running with blind panic. Behind them, the roar grew closer, hot breath seeming to sear the back of their necks. The lantern toppled, its light flaring wild across the water. They clawed their way up the bank, lungs on fire, hearts ready to burst. When one dared to glance back, the creature had stopped at the river's edge, 15 yards away. It stood upright, chest-heaving shoulders like a fortress wall, eyes glowing faint amber in the dark. Then came the roar, a rolling, thunderous bellow that echoed through the valley walls. A warning that said without words, "Do not return. Morning light." The gravel bar told the story. Tracks, 16 to 17 inches long, pressed deep into the earth, strides over 5 feet apart. A cooler overturned its latch, ripped open food scattered across the stones. The musk of something wild and foul still clung to the damp morning air. Analysis. This was not just an encounter, it was an attack. Most Bigfoot reports end with distant observation or intimidation. But here on the Clearwater, it crossed a river, approached directly, and launched a charge. Was it territorial defense or a deliberate attempt to drive them away? Researchers often cite this as one of the most dangerous encounters ever recorded in the Pacific Northwest. Chapter 4. The Watcher on the Ridge. Silverton, Oregon, 2016. The family's campsite sat on a flat clearing, open in front, backed by a 30-meter ridge rising steep behind them. The Oregon sky was crystal clear, the full moon spilling silver across ancient Douglas fir. 2 children played near the SUV. Their parents sat by a small fire, the scent of burning wood drifting on the night air. Peace. Safety. The kind of quiet only the wilderness can give. 9:00 p.m. The insect chorus cut out abruptly. The forest fell silent, so silent it seemed to swallow their own breathing. The father lifted his flashlight toward the ridge, and his heart dropped. At the crest of the hill, silhouetted against a field of stars, stood a massive shape, taller than the young trees around it. Shoulders impossibly broad, head slightly pointed, arms hanging long at its sides. It did not move. It did not sway. It simply stood black and immovable like a monolith. Yet its silence was more terrifying than any roar. Moonlight traced a silver edge along its thick hair, glinting faintly across one shoulder. Then a breath, long, heavy, low. It rolled down the slope and seemed to rattle the couple's nerves to the core. "Turn off the light." The mother whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Don't make it notice us." The flashlight snapped off. Only the fire remained small and flickering. They sat frozen, the pounding of their own hearts deafening in their ears, the firewood popping softly like distant gunfire. Above them, the silhouette still loomed, watching, unmoving. Then it crouched, lowering its bulk like a predator ready to spring. For several moments it held that pose, then shifted, slipping behind a cluster of trees. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed along the ridge. A branch cracked, and then silence. Morning light. The father climbed to the ridge. There patches of grass lay flattened, each step nearly 5 feet apart. A fresh limb, thick as a man's wrist, twisted until the fibers splintered. From that vantage point, the entire campsite spread below, visible in perfect clarity. He understood then, all night, his family had been under observation. Analysis reports from Oregon often describe this behavior, Bigfoot taking the high ground, watching from ridgelines, choosing distance and silence over confrontation. It feels less like intimidation, more like surveillance, a predator's patience waiting, calculating. Where Idaho gave us aggression, Oregon gives us quiet dominance. 6 nights in a Canadian cabin, 2 giants by a Washington fire, a furious river charge in Idaho, and a silent watcher above an Oregon ridge. Together they form a clear pattern. Bigfoot is not a fleeting shadow. It leaves footprints, broken branches, smears on glass, and echoes in the night. And in every region its behavior shifts, persistent in Canada, social in Washington, aggressive in Idaho, and calculating in Oregon. So where are you watching from? Leave your city or country in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10, and don't forget to subscribe because next time we ask Bigfoot protector or predator,